Hello, this is Julie Murphy with Arizona Farm Bureau, and it's our weekly Talk to a Farmer Friday. We're at the magic hour of 10 o'clock or close to 10 o'clock. And guess where we're at now? We're in Yuma, and my guest this time is Kirk Dunn of Good Soil, Good Dirt Farms.
Yeah, we don't want to get too technical around it.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that name for your farm, though. It's a farm that you and your wife, Sierra, run, and that she.
Speak of the devil, she's
she's driving past us. So take a good look. Bye. So we have been celebrating since the new numbers came out for the U.S. Census of Agriculture. The numbers were captured in 2022, but the release of them was 2024. So I always highlight that just to confuse people. But if you're joining us live while we're here in Yuma, feel free to ask us questions, and just know that most of our focus today is Yuma agriculture and young farmers. So as I go over and highlight some of the Census of Agriculture things, there's two reasons why I am here today. Number one, Yuma ranks in the top 40 of U.S. counties in terms of value of agriculture production. And if you look behind us, you'll get a sense of that. And number two, and one of the reasons why I wanted to interview Kirk Dunn, is I'm featuring and highlighting young farmers, because those statistics were captured. Here in the state of Arizona, there's only 7.7 of young farmers below the age of 35. And so that's one of the reasons that we're talking to you, Kirk. So give us kind of an overview of your farming.
So I'm a fourth generation farmer, third generation here in Yuma. We're here at one of our original farms that my granddad purchased back in '63 when he moved here. We farm about 1,200 acres of what we consider here in Yuma to be rotation crops. So those would be crops that are grown in the springtime or summer months following the winter produce. So like this farm that you see behind me, we'll actually lease out to a vegetable farming company. They'll grow all kinds of lettuces, broccolis, cauliflower, spinach, you name it. As they harvest those crops, then we get the ground back and we'll plant either wheat, we do cotton, Sudan seed, a variety of other seed crops, vegetable seeds, onions, broccoli seed, things of that nature. So that's pretty much what we do. Is we'll farm from in the spring and summer months, and then in the fall we'll turn the ground back over for vegetable production.
Awesome. So Kirk, you are a U of A graduate. When you
That's right.
Yes, Aggie House member?
Yeah, Aggie House alum.
Right. So, and I hear they've done a huge renovation.
Yeah, I still haven't made it over to see it, but
yes.
I've just seen the pictures.
I'm very excited for you guys, because it was getting kind of rough there for a while.
Yeah, even my dad, who's a fellow alumni, when he dropped me off, he's like, "Ooh, I don't remember it being this bad."
Yeah. So, I was kind of going down a rabbit trail there, but kudos and credit to those that launched Aggie House and now redid it. But you were a U of A graduate. When you went, did you know you wanted to be a farmer?
No, I knew I did not want to be a farmer.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so what changed?
So really just life experience. So I actually really wanted, I like many, I changed my major 4 or 5 times. I don't know. I drove my advisor crazy, but then I finally did land back on agriculture, but I wanted to be ag adjacent, wasn't wanting to get really into production agriculture.
Okay.
I actually kind of wanted to go up into Salinas. Well, I shouldn't say I didn't want to be in production agriculture. I didn't really want to be in a family business. I wanted to go up to the central coast of California and see how the vegetables were grown up there. My wife and I were dating at the time, and she got a job in Yuma and basically said, "I'm going to be in Yuma. I don't know where you're going to be."
Really?
So came back to Yuma and kind of bounced around for a few years. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Ended up actually coming back to help my dad with a harvest one summer because he was in a bind. And after that, I told my wife, I think I want to come back. And she said, I thought you didn't want anything to do with it. I said, I don't know. I just, fell back in love with it, just being back here where I grew up. And
your roots are here.
Yeah. The rest is history. That was back in 2021. And loved it.
I think you said you launched your farm in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I came back and was working for my dad's operation and our seed operation that he has. And then in 22, Sierra and I took over the farm full time.
Again, we're on Talk to a Farmer Friday, and my guest today is Kirk Dunn. Remember, if you're joining us live, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Joel, who's helping me with this whole process, can kind of throw those out. So again, since I'm celebrating the Census of Ag, those numbers have come out. I'm coming to you because for two reasons. Yuma at such high productivity and because you're a young farmer. I want to prove there's proof that there are young farmers. Now, statistically, you're in kind of the low end of the statistics. The average age of today's farmer here in Arizona is 60 years old, but you're proof of the pudding that young farmers like to get into farming. But my first question is about the productivity of Yuma. And that's the other highlight. Yuma falls in with Pinal County, Maricopa County, and again, Yuma County, as being in the top 40 counties in the United States. And there's almost 3,000 counties across the United States. So in terms of value of ag production, Yuma is top notch. Talk about that. I mean, we sort of maybe know why, but what's your take on that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons why. A lot has been said about some of the reasons, so some people listening may already know this, but we here in Yuma, we sit, we're in this valley, we're at the confluence of two rivers, the Gila and the Colorado. So we have amazing soil because this was basically the flood basin for those two rivers for tens of thousands of years. And so we have amazing soil quality, hence the name Good Dirt Farming. We also have unprecedented access to water, and Yuma is known as the sunniest city in the world. There's a statistic out there that shows.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a statistic about number of what makes up a sunny day. It's percentage of hours of full sunshine, and Yuma is the sunniest city in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're pretty much as close to a natural greenhouse as you can get down here. So we have, which makes us perfect. It's a perfect environment to be able to grow a lot of high value crops where a crop failure would be much more catastrophic than in other types of commodities that you might typically think of when you think of a farming operation. So that's where you get not only the fresh produce crops, but also the seed crops that are incredibly high value. And we have incredible access to labor with our proximity to Mexico. We have great access to different shipping markets. So all of those things are kind of what pulls agriculture together and creates this perfect little oasis for ag production. But the other thing that doesn't always get talked about, I think, is just the people. So the people here, the people here now, and especially those that came before us, a huge reason why we have this great vegetable industry, for example, is because those that came before us had the foresight to begin farming these crops. In the 60s when my granddad came here, this entire valley was just Bermuda grass. So it's not like this has always been a vegetable region.
Okay.
Somebody at some point had to decide that they were going to try to grow different crops, and then they had to bring infrastructure in. So if you drive, there's a several mile strip here in Yuma that has nothing but coolers and packing houses and just a ton of infrastructure for all of these well-known brand name companies. Mm-hmm. And then there's a really interesting blend of family farms that have been here for generations, like ours, and we're actually newcomers in this valley. We came here in the 60s. I know families that have been here since the 1860s.
Wow.
But then we also have a large mix of some larger, more corporate operations. But even those people, the people who work in those operations, who maybe didn't grow up in agriculture, who don't own the business, they take an incredible amount of pride in what they do. Like there's some people that are working for those operations that they're way better farmers than I'll ever be. And they take so much pride in what they do, even though it's not their name that's on the box that gets shipped to the grocery store. It's not their name that's on the side of the truck or whatever. They have an immense amount of pride in what they do. And that is what I think differentiates Yuma from other even high producing counties across the country, is the amount of pride that we're kind of like a little island down here. Wow. I think people often feel like we in Yuma are overlooked nationwide, but even in our own state, politically and geographically. And so because of that, I think people kind of have a bit of a chip on their shoulder down here, and they just take an immense amount of pride, and they love what they do down here.
That's awesome. And my understanding is what you do in Yuma, the high value ag production that we experience here in this county, it really cannot, especially with the vegetable production, it cannot be replicated anywhere else. And when I say that, we do have produce growing in Pinal County. We do have produce growing in Maricopa County. What I'm speaking to is the level and the scale, and you certainly couldn't do what we do here in Arizona in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. We can't we can't just pick this up and take it over
Mm-hmm.
there. We have the available labor. We have, to your point, the infrastructure. Some of it I've gotten to tour myself, and I fully agree with you. The infrastructure itself is incredible. This whole transportation corridor,
Mm-hmm.
and so many other things, quality seed. And then farmers like you don't give yourself that much credit, but I will. The farmers here are doing an incredible job. Okay, so again, if anybody has any questions as you're joining us live, don't hesitate to post in the comments section. This is Julie Murphy with the Arizona Farm Bureau on Talk to a Farmer Friday, and I'm interviewing Kirk Dunn, a Yuma farmer with Good Dirt Farms, right? Yay! And I'm here because of two reasons. I've mentioned Yuma, its high productivity, and now we're kind of going to get into the demographics. I'm going to do a little bit of reading, so bear with me. The average age of the U.S. producers is 58 years old. It's kind of cool here, so I'm thinking degrees. But the average age for an Arizona farmer is 60 years old, so a couple of years older here in the state of Arizona. Across Arizona, 16%, 16.5% of the producers are at least 75 years old. So we have an older demographic in agriculture, obviously. And it's not that much different than what's going on across the United States, in which 13.8% of the producers were 75 years old or older. So again, we have an older demographic. But here's the interesting numbers and why I landed on harassing poor Kirk, because he's a young farmer. In Arizona, 7.2% of the Arizona producers were considered young producers. Those producers less than 35 years of age, or less. Nationally, it's 8.8%. So on the national level, it's a little higher than us. But you're proof of the pudding for that 35 or younger age group that you can do farming.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the question I want to ask as it relates to demographics is, what do you think as a young farmer you bring to the table in that whole demographic mix?
I think, personally, that my mindset is a little bit different. I've noticed, I think what makes a young farmer unique is not always just what you see on the farm. I think there is some aspect of that of wanting to try new things, and I constantly have to weigh this balance between listening to those people who've gone before me, who've been here before, and yet trying to temper my ambitions and wanting to try new things, and these people tell me, I've been there, I've tried it, it doesn't work, and then I go ahead and try it anyways, and it doesn't work, and they were right. So usually I try to err on the side of those with experience and try to listen to them, because try to remind myself that I'm not unique. These, my dad, my granddad, all these other generations before us, they were also young farmers once. They also have tried different things, and if they're telling me that it doesn't work, or try to listen to that and learn from their experience as opposed to my own mistakes.
That's awesome.
But there are some things when it comes to technology and being a little more receptive to adapting to new technologies as it comes out, that skews a little more on the younger side of the spectrum. But the bigger mindset that I think we as young farmers and ranchers bring to the table is not on farm, but it's more, if you take a 10,000-foot view and you look at some of these policy issues that affect us, like things that the Farm Bureau are definitely on the front lines for us on. I think it gives us a little bit of a perspective and a sense of urgency, because there's a lot of people who come to the table to help influence policy, who have a lot of experience, which can't be replicated. They have a lot of wisdom, which is desperately needed, but they're also kind of protecting a legacy. Whereas I'm not necessarily protecting a legacy, although I am a legacy farmer. I look at, my daughters, when my oldest is my age, I will be an average age farmer, according to these USDA numbers, so that's, I've got a lot of time ahead of me before I'm even at the average age. And I look more, so I'm looking at like a 30-year, 50-year, 100-year timeline when we're looking at things like water, we're looking at things like immigration law, when we're looking at all of these different policy changes that deeply affect us. I'm looking at how can I better impact and influence these policies to affect our industry for my daughter, because all the decisions that we make, all the work that we put in today, we're going to reap the rewards or suffer the consequences 30 years from now. And that's going to be when I'm, according to these census numbers, I'm just hitting my peak,
Right.
I'll
Right.
be an average farmer. And then should my daughters decide they want to get into farming, I want to make sure that I'm leaving them and building an environment where they have the option to, if they want to be fifth generation farmers, I want to make sure that they have the option to. So I think that different
That's
kind of
awesome.
perspective is what young farmers bring to the table.
And I like that you speak to that. And we just got to see these two precious little girls, another one on the way. And I am so not surprised that is an important focus and should be for any of our family farms, since the majority of them, 96% of our farms here in the state of Arizona are still family owned and operated. They might be incorporated. They might be big. We have a tendency to have to scale because of the cost to farm, but they're family farms. So it was neat to say that. Do you think, I'm asking a tough question, it's not really on the list. Are you heard by that older generation? Are they hearing from young Kirk Dunn, who falls into that only 7.2% of Arizona's farmers?
I think just like anything, it depends on the person. Some people are, they love new perspectives, and some people don't want to hear it. So,
okay.
I think that's where the consistency comes in. We've actually got our next County Farm Bureau meeting coming up next week, or maybe the week after. But somebody had asked me if I could go do a different meeting in Phoenix, and I've missed the last two County Farm Bureau meetings 2 months in a row because I was out of town, and that hasn't happened in 4 years. I've only missed one meeting in 4 years.
Yeah, you're always there.
I told this other person who wanted me to come up for a different meeting, I said, I am not missing 3 meetings in a row. That consistency, even if we come to the table and to feel like you don't always have your voice heard, you can't just say, oh, they don't want to listen, I'm done, why even try? We just like in agriculture, when we're talking to some of these other big players and we feel like our voice isn't being heard, it may not be heard in any one moment, but if that cannot be the reason why we just throw our hands up and say, oh well, we gave it our best shot. We have to keep trying, keep having the conversations, keep trying to educate not only consumers, but educate our lawmakers.
Right.
And so it's just consistency. So I think I've proven over the last number of years that I'm not going anywhere. So you guys better put up with me and don't just ignore me.
Good.
But for the most part, everybody that farms around me that's not my age, they've been very receptive. They're all
Awesome.
very friendly. They're all super helpful as far as giving me advice on the farm, because I'm just made of questions because I don't know what I'm doing. So they're all amazing people.
When I started in my career, I love that you point that out. It was nothing but questions that I was asking, because that was the only way I was going to learn.
Yeah.
We get our degrees, but that's kind of in a classroom. Life experiences are the things that we definitely have to know. And I'm going to give props to Arizona Farm Bureau's Young Farmer and Rancher program. You're wearing one of the jackets, and that's a program designed to support and to build out the leadership for our young farmers and ranchers, and you've been involved in it for a very long time. So talk about, you still have some years.
I do, yeah.
You
I technically qualify.
Yeah, you won't age out until 35, but talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great program to help you get involved not only with Farm Bureau, but just to meet new people who are like-minded, who are interested in the same industry that you're trying to be a part of. It's given me a lot of opportunities to travel and meet people from other regions who farm differently and be able to learn those new perspectives, learn not only on-farm stuff, but again, going back to the policy thing, see what people who are really heavily involved in trying to push good, solid agriculture policy from Georgia or Michigan. They don't maybe understand why we view immigration reform a certain way. So being able to have those conversations has been really helpful.
Good point.
And just expand your breadth of knowledge when it comes to all these types of issues, so that way you can begin to get that experience. And as you get more experience on the farm, in Farm Bureau, and you can use that experience combined with the knowledge that the Young Farmers and Ranchers program gives you in these different areas, and that combination of knowledge and experience is what produces wisdom, and then that just helps you to be more impactful in the industry.
Couldn't have said it better myself. What are your aspirations for your family, for your farming?
I don't. I
You
struggle.
kind of hinted to it earlier, with how you're wanting to think about your kids if they grow up and say, "Dad, I want to farm." But
Yeah. So my aspirations are to, I would say, just continue to build a sound uh, business that can, you know, withstand hard times, withstand 9.5% interest rates, and
yeah,
withstand 70 cent or 55 cent cotton markets or whatever.
oh,
Be able to weather those storms. And but as far as like I don't my kind of motto is I want to be the best, not the biggest. I don't care to farm 10,000 acres, and if that happens, great. If it doesn't happen, great. So, but I don't know. When you sent me that question, I was reminded of Paul writing in First Thessalonians, where he said, "Make it your life's ambition to lead a simple life, lead a quiet life," and that's what I love about farming.
amen.
It's not so much being ambitious and growing and doing all these great things. It's just enjoying this life that I get to live, which is unlike anything out there.
Oh, I love that, Kirk. Well said. So, what do you like the most about farming?
I think just that the lifestyle,
Okay.
and the people. It's so it reminds me so much of just your life. People have busier seasons and slower seasons in life, and farming is like that. It's very seasonal. We get crazy busy, and you'll work harder than, I would argue, any other industry. And then you'll have other times when you can afford to be able to go and pick the kids up from school and just hang out with them at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, and
Yeah.
and just being able to enjoy those moments is amazing. And being able to rearrange my schedule and come talk to you, or
Yeah.
go help out at any other organizational function, and give back to the community. Is you don't always get that in other industries, and a typical 9 to 5. So I also love being outside. I would hate to be cooped up all day.
And
you
who
know
knows, that maybe that inspired you a little bit to shift, even though you did say you wanted to stay in at least ag related businesses. But one day you woke up and you were inspired to farm. I love that story, or how you came. There was an evolution to the
hmm
process. You knew you wanted to go to U of A. You knew you wanted to stay in agriculture. You just weren't convinced you wanted to be a farmer. So on that point, with what you like about farming, the adjustments can make to it, even in your day to day, and I appreciate that you rearrange things so that Joel and I
Oh
can
yeah.
show up and be down here in Yuma. We have a pretty important following. Everywhere I go, somebody is mentioning Talk to a Farmer Friday. And I started saying we were averaging 250 views each session, and now it's 350 and sometimes 400. And had an interview with Mark Killian, the former director of the Arizona Department of Ag. He had over 700 views.
Wow.
So, that's auditorium size seating. So
Yeah.
it's worth it to get out here and talk to people and show them what we're doing. So the segue to all this is there a technology? It may not be a fair question because technology is changing and other things are emerging. But do you see a technology that's really going to be maybe the next big thing? Or I don't know if it's the next big thing, but it will help with those incremental gains that we can build out in farming.
It's hard to put your finger on one particular technology. Something that there's always different technologies to help try to automate things as labor gets more expensive, and it's harder to
Yeah,
keep that team built out, and what you need. We've got people here who are doing a lot of spray applications with drones. I've looked into that, trying to figure out how to
sure.
make that pencil out, because I think that would be interesting. There's all kinds of stuff coming down the pipeline for automated self-driving tractors, and I would not be surprised if 20 years from now, instead of big full-size tractors, we had 6 or 7 tiny little robots going through all these fields, being controlled by one person with an iPad.
Yeah.
Um, so I think AI is something that is going to affect people. It's the biggest thing though for me is and I think I gave this answer to you last time we talked, which was probably 5 or 6 years ago, on Talk to a Farmer at least, which is
Yeah,
just
I remember that.
which is it's social media. It's the way we communicate. And it's not always the same. Like, it used to be MySpace and Facebook. Now it's TikTok and Twitter, and it's going to continue to evolve. But it's those how we communicate with people who are not farming, because
Right.
that's the biggest thing. Is it's not necessarily one silver bullet technologically speaking that's going to come in and help us be a more productive operation. There's all kinds of tools that we're going to continue to try to use. The bigger thing is on these larger policy issues that are bringing us the big heavy interest rates, that are restricting our access to labor, that are making it more expensive to keep people on, that are, potentially restricting our access to water, and that are giving us more environmental regulations that make it more expensive to maintain these tractors. All these big issues, those are made by people who are elected by the 98% that don't farm. And so those communication mediums, I think, are still, it's still to me the most impactful technologies. How do we reach those people and make them understand what we do, why we do it, and why it's important? So
Yeah.
that to me is still the biggest technological aspect of what we're doing right now.
Right. And so I'm going to ask you the hopeful question. That's last, but I'm going to pause for station identification. Julie Murphy with Arizona Farm Bureau interviewing Kirk Dunn of Good Dirt Farms. I don't know why I always have to pause because I always want to say soil instead of dirt. But we're here in Yuma live, and we're talking about the ag census. We're talking about Yuma's high productivity, and I wanted to feature a farmer that's a young farmer. He falls into that 7.2% of Arizona farmers that are 35 years old or younger. You alluded to some of the tough issues. And by the way, do we have any questions, Joe? Which is good. I mean, that's fine. You alluded to it earlier. Cotton prices, it might be 55 cents, and yet it takes 80 cents a pound to grow the cotton or more. And so those challenges of when the commodity market's going down. What never seems to go down is our input costs. I did a segment on the Mike Broomhead show on Monday, and he was wanting to find out what's happening with farming. Our fertilizer costs have increased by 78%. That's not a cost that you and I we're dealing with inflation in our pocketbooks, but that's a increase that I don't know we as individuals could handle, like with our food. Mm-hmm. We've had something like 20 and sometimes 28% increases in certain food costs, but 78% increase in fertilizer costs, 78% increase in our just so many other things. I can't remember the other ones, but there were two that were on the 78% increase spectrum. Despite all that, and by the way, I'm smelling this wonderful onion, so somebody's growing.
Yeah, they're harvesting onions about half a mile away over there.
Are you hopeful about farming despite all the challenges that we're facing? When I say hopeful, maybe 20, 30 years from now, and certainly there will be different looks to what we're doing and stuff.
Yeah, I am hopeful. I think it definitely takes, it's going to be a lot harder, especially that barrier of entry for somebody who doesn't come from a generational farm or ranch like I do, but is interested, being able to get into the industry and build your own business. It's hard these days harder than ever, I would say. Maybe not ever, because there's been some pretty bad times in this country, but it's harder than it has been in a very long time to start any small business. But then you have, a small business like farming that is not really all that small when you factor in all the capital investments and everything that it takes to make it go, and the size and scope of an operation you need to really make it feasible. If you're wanting to do it full time and not supplement your income, it's hard, it's difficult, it can be frustrating. But I am hopeful. I think farmers are so resilient, and farmers have always had to buy at retail, sell at wholesale, pay the freight both ways, all that. That's nothing new.
Yeah.
But it is, I was helping my granddad rebuild some plumbing on his well house that supplies our shop in the farmhouse here. And he went and bought some hose clamps, and he came back and he said, this stupid little hose clamp was like $1.22. He said, back when not that long ago, it would have been 20 cents, 15 cents.
Yeah.
And, we just kind of got to talking about how when he was farming in Bermuda, how a section for a swather sickle bar would have been 30 cents. And now it's like $3.99 for a cheap one that wears out, or $10.99 if you want to get the expensive one,
So I'll tell you a story. And Joel, while I'm telling this story, kind of pan around because they'll still hear from our mics so that everybody can see to my right, and then, So one of the things that I remember when our family farmed, Murphy Farms, UAN or something 32, it was a fertilizer. I want to say that my dad told me it was anywhere from $125 to $200 a ton during that period.
Mm-hmm.
I double checked the market prices on it. Right now it's at $600 a ton.
Mm-hmm.
So again, from going,
which last year was at like 720,
right.
750.
It showed that uptick that you speak of all the way up to $750 a ton. So just making those kind of comparisons, and somebody says, well, that's a ton of fertilizer. Again, we're farming pretty big farms, mm-hmm. and I'm not quite sure how much you have to buy to supply if you were going to use fertilizer on that wheat field behind there. And it's the UN32 is high in nitrogen, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just remembering this some stuff, and I'm so excited. But when you compare those costs and how much you have to buy for even, I won't say a big farm, but for a lot of people, they might say an acre is a lot. And I think you said your farm was 1,200 acres? And that's pretty much the size of my dad's farm. So those fertilizer costs can really make an impact.
Yeah, and especially if you think about, like the USDA has some really cool programs. Like I took advantage of their beginning farmer and rancher loan through the FSA when I first got started. Yeah, okay. So actually, before we really took over the full operation, I started the business while I was still managing my dad's farm and went through that loan process, which was great. But it caps out at $400,000, which is just not nearly enough to run an operation at this scale. So even though I still had not much experience and not a whole lot of access to capital, that some of those tools that we do have maybe need to get looked at as far as opening them up to what obviously the USDA would consider that to be a larger farming operation, but it's really 1,200 acres for I have 2 employees and we're making it all work. It's not like I have 2 tractors. It's not like it's a huge,
right.
What you would think of as a big operation.
That we have seen and experienced because of family and our other farm friends.
And neighbors, yeah exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of where some of the mindset needs to shift. But going back to your question about being hopeful, I am, like we mentioned the fertilizer prices going really high. It was same thing with diesel, and it was at $5.50 right. A gallon for red dye diesel. And that's come way down, and some of it's coming back up, and world politics and global markets, that's all well beyond my pay grade. But I think we've seen them ebb and flow. I don't know that they'll ever come down to what we would like to see them come down to, but I don't think it's something where we're always going to have to deal with 9.5% interest rates. We're always going to have to deal with $700 a ton nitrogen costs.
Right.
So I am hopeful. I mean, I think people have been through these types of, global issues before. It's not nearly as bad as it was post-pandemic with supply chain problems, and so trying to keep the faith with regards to that. Remember that people have been doing this for a very long time, and some they're not always successful at it. So it's not easy. You have to be very intentional and wise and rely on other people's experience, and get lean when you need to, and be willing to go irrigate at night by yourself because you can't hire that extra person on, like all those things, but I don't think it's quite as bleak as some people think, which I think is should make you feel optimistic.
Yes, and I do, and I thank you. Kirk Dunn, you are a young, wise farmer, and
maybe 2 out of 3 on that one.
But I am also glad that you're part of that, at least the 7.2% of our young farmers, up-and-coming farmers. Thank you also for your involvement in the Arizona Farm Bureau. It's so important, and the fact that you're fully engaged in the young farmers and ranchers. But everyone, thank you for those that have joined us, and for those of you that will watch this later, we will save it to video, and also we'll upload it on YouTube and share it on our website, Arizona Farm Bureau's azfb.org. So thank you, those that have joined us, and those that will see this later. Blessings to everyone.